you got hit by a commercial truck. And now the company is pointing fingers at the driver, denying fault and dragging their feet on paying your bills. But in Florida, you don't have to just take their word for it. If the company hired recklessly, ignored safety rules, or even if the driver was just doing their job, the law gives you multiple ways to hold that company accountable for your injuries. I'm Pablo Tamayo, personal injury attorney here in Florida, and I've forced trucking companies to pay my clients hundreds and thousands of dollars by proving they broke the rules long before the crash ever even happened. In this video, I'll show you the 3 key strategies that make these companies pay, from exposing bad hires to using federal violations as legal levers. Because if you only go after the driver, you're leaving money on the table and letting the people equally, or at least partially responsible, off the hook. Let's start with the first way companies can be forced to pay you after a truck accident in Florida, by showing the trucking company did something wrong or in how they were negligent. Think about what happens before a truck even gets on the road. Trucking companies are supposed to put only safe, responsible drivers behind the wheel. They're required to train their drivers, check their backgrounds, and make sure that their trucks are properly maintained at all times. If they cut corners, they hire someone with a bad driving record, or skip the regular maintenance of those trucks, or if they pressure their drivers to break the law just to meet a delivery deadline, they're taking risks with your safety. Now, imagine you were driving on the highway, minding your own business, and a huge semi-truck suddenly sideswipes your car. After the crash, it turns out the driver had been on the road for way too many hours, way over the time allowed in Florida or by the federal regulations, and was actually falling asleep at the wheel. Or maybe the driver had a history of DUIs that the company ignored when they hired him. Or maybe the truck's brakes failed because they hadn't been inspected in months. In situations like these, we look for evidence that the company didn't do what it was supposed to do. Maybe they didn't follow federal safety regulations. Maybe they skipped maintenance logs or ignored warnings about the driver's history. If we can prove that, Florida law says that they can be held directly responsible for your injuries caused by their driver. We've had clients come in after a wreck feeling totally overwhelmed. One woman, for example, was hit at an intersection by an 18-wheeler. Of course, the company initially tried to blame her, but our investigation found that their driver had been involved in 2 accidents within 3 years prior to them hiring him as a driver. But the company hired him anyway. In addition to the evidence we accumulated the driver was negligent in the accident, the evidence of the actual trucking company's negligence pushed the case to a significant settlement. Bottom line, trucking companies have a legal duty to keep the roads safe by hiring safe commercial drivers. If they cut corners and you get hurt, they can and should be made to pay for your injuries. That's the first way to hold trucking companies accountable. Now, let's talk about the second way companies can be forced to pay you, and that's vicarious liability. I know that may sound like legal mumbo jumbo, but stick with me here. It's simpler than it sounds. Vicarious liability basically means a company is responsible for what its employees do while they're on the job. In Florida, this is sometimes called the employer's liability rule. And here's what it means in practice. If a truck driver causes a crash while performing services for the trucking company, the company is on the hook even if the company did everything right. So let's break that down with an example. Say you're driving through Orlando and a delivery truck, clearly marked with a big company logo, runs a red light and smashes into your car. The driver admits he wasn't paying attention. Maybe he was texting, or maybe he just made a mistake. You end up with a trip to the ER, a pile of medical bills for a serious lingering injury, and a car that's probably completely totaled. So here's the key. Even if the company did their background checks, trained the driver, kept the truck in great shape, if that driver was on the clock doing company business, Florida law says the company itself is responsible for paying your injuries. And that's vicarious liability. Companies have deeper pockets and larger insurance policies than individual drivers. If the trucker only has a bare bones insurance policy, but the company has a $1 million policy, let's say, it makes a huge difference in what you can actually recover for your injuries. You shouldn't be stuck with bills just because a company says it's not our fault, it's the driver's fault. The law says otherwise. Now, there are some limits. If the driver was way off course or doing something he wasn't supposed to, like running personal errands in the company truck, it can get a little complicated. But in most cases, if the driver was driving his employer's truck or driving his own truck on his company's time and he caused the crash, the company can be held responsible for your injuries. I can think of a case from not too long ago. A family was rear-ended by a big box truck here in Florida. The driver admitted he was rushing to make a delivery. The company tried to point the finger at just the driver because the driver owned the truck and alleged him to be only an independent contractor. But we used the vicarious liability rule to establish that the driver was within the course and scope of performing work services for the company. We ended up getting a much better settlement for the family than if we had just sued the driver alone. Now, always remember, after a truck accident, it's not just about the driver. The company is oftentimes just as responsible. And that's one of the most powerful ways to make sure you get paid and compensated what you deserve after an accident when you've been injured. The third way companies in Florida can be forced to pay after a truck accident is by proving they broke federal trucking laws. Now, these are special safety rules that all trucking companies have to follow, no matter where they're based or where the crash happens. The government knows how dangerous big trucks can be, so they've set strict rules. How many consecutive hours a driver can work, how often trucks must be checked and repaired, how cargo should be loaded and secured, and much more. These rules are supposed to keep everyone on the road safer. If a company ignores them and somebody gets hurt, the law is on your side. So here's a real-world example. Imagine a long-haul trucker driving straight from Miami to way up in the Panhandle in Panama City with barely any stops. The rules say a driver can only be on the road for so many hours before they must take a rest. But trucking companies sometimes pressure their drivers to ignore these limits to meet strict delivery deadlines. When that happens and drivers get tired, their reaction times drop and the risk of a crash significantly increases. Or take truck maintenance. Federal rules require detailed records showing every inspection and repair. Some companies, they may fudge these logs, or they may forego the logs with repairs if they can get away with it. If a truck's tire blows out or the brakes fail because the company skipped maintenance and you're hurt in an accident, it's a clear violation. So how does this help you? Well, if we can show the company broke any of these federal rules, it's usually evidence to show that they were negligent. In court, breaking a safety law often tips the scales heavily in your favor. It shows the company put profit ahead of safety. And in Florida, that's a serious issue. We know from experience in handling trucking cases, it's not always easy, but if you're able to gather the appropriate documents to show that the company had these violations, then the insurance company will be much more inclined to settle your case for a higher number, knowing a jury would be furious if they saw these types of records and violations. So, if you're ever injured in a crash with a truck, remember, there are layers of rules in place to protect you. If the company ignored those rules, it's not just bad luck, it's their responsibility, and the law gives you the power to hold them accountable for your injuries. So let me pull everything together for you. After a trucking accident in Florida, you have 3 powerful ways to force a company to compensate you for your injuries and damages. 1, you can prove the company was negligent, like hiring an unsafe driver or skipping maintenance. 2, you can rely on Florida's vicarious liability rule, which lets you go after the company for what the driver did while working for the company. And 3, you can show the company broke federal trucking safety laws, which puts the blame squarely on them. Understanding these options puts you way ahead of most people after a crash. The trucking companies and their insurance adjusters are hoping you don't know your rights. They want you to settle for less or just give up altogether. But the truth is, you have strong tools on your side. The law in Florida is designed to protect you, not the big trucking companies. So let me leave you with some real-world advice, just in case you or someone you love is ever in a wreck involving a truck. Get medical help first. Don't worry about anything else. Your health is always the top priority. Call the police, make sure a report is made. That report can be crucial. Take photos of everything if you can, and if you can't, maybe a family member or friend can help. Your injuries, the car damage, the truck, the license plates, the company logos, any skid marks, anything about the surrounding scene can help. Write down what happened while it's fresh in your memory. The small details matter. Don't talk to the trucking company's insurance adjuster without legal advice. They're not on your side, no matter how friendly they may sound. Remember, we investigate these types of cases every day. Trucking companies will fight hard to protect their money, but with the right approach and strategy, you can make them pay what you're owed and what you're entitled to for your compensation and your damages. You just learned the 3 main ways companies in Florida can be forced to pay you after a trucking accident, and why trucking cases aren't like typical fender benders. If you want to be prepared for the next step, don't miss our next video. Do I have to report my car accident to my insurance company if it wasn't my fault? It's packed with tips that could save you thousands, to protect your rights, and keep you from making costly mistakes. In your case, you don't want to guess and hope you're doing the right thing. So click over right now, and I'll see you over there.